It's 1982. This is me, and this is my mom. To my 16-year-old self, my mom is a force to be reckoned with. A driven, stubborn, smart, registered nurse and mother of 5 children. But at this moment, mom is standing in the kitchen, screaming out her frustration and agony. She's just gone through the painful process of quitting smoking. Maybe this 3rd time will be the charm, but right now, all she knows is that she's dying for a cigarette. I'm in the 10th grade, working on a school research essay, and as you can see, growing my hair. Not coincidentally, I decided to write about the dangers of smoking. Mind you, I'm a good student. I researched the topic using state-of-the-art information technology of the day, primarily what I can find through the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature at the library. For those of you who don't know, this was how students did research back in the 80s. All I could find back then were secondhand sources in print newspapers and magazines. I concluded that there were clearly severe health risks to tobacco smoking, specifically lung cancer. I also concluded we didn't know whether nicotine was addictive and secondhand smoke was dangerous. But the tobacco companies knew. They strategically created doubt and deliberately kept the negative research results on nicotine and smoking from reaching the public, including my mom and me. Mom did quit smoking in 1982. By then, a bold New York Times article stated that nicotine is as addictive as heroin, cocaine, or amphetamines. No kidding. That matched what I'd seen my mom going through. 5 years later, she died from complications of metastasized cancer in her lungs. 2 years after her death, a tobacco company CEO testified under oath to Congress, "I do not believe that nicotine is addictive." I tell this story in part to shame such liars and to honor the memory of my dear mother, but I also do so to draw lessons for today and for the future. Fast forward to the 21st century. The Reader's Guide Index is a relic of the past. We live in a globally internetworked world. Knowledge is exploding. Today's students have access to exponentially growing digital information and data through the web. Professional and governmental organizations put out consensus reports and data sets that are free and open for use by the public. We thought in the 1990s that all we had to do was set information free, but that's not all it takes to get the whole story. You see, in 2021, we are in what some people have called the misinformation age. Companies and politicians have learned from the strategies developed by the tobacco industry and are even more aggressively pushing propaganda. Truthiness trumps facts. False ideas spread like wildfire over social media, thanks to algorithms that deliberately manipulate people. In the last year, we've seen the logical conclusion of these trends. Fake news run amok has contributed to hundreds of thousands of deaths from a global pandemic. Deliberate misinformation led to a deadly insurrection on the United States Capitol, seeking to overturn the results of an election. It is literally a life and death situation, both for individuals in our society and for our democracy. So, what are we going to do about it? What we need is improved information literacy and data literacy. For the past 12 years, my colleagues and I have been working on this. We're trying to educate young people to be data detectives who interrupt and mitigate the damage of fake news. In 2009, our group of university researchers and educators at schools started a project to teach STEM literacy through journalism. Our programs eventually involved 75 teachers and over 100,000 students in 4 states who worked out of newsrooms in schools and after-school programs. We co-designed a curriculum where high school and middle school students could explore contentious topics like climate change, fracking, mental health issues, food and product safety, the proliferation of prisons, and gun violence. Let me tell you about one of them to illustrate how it worked. Chelsea was a high school student in Colorado taking a class called data literacy. She considered herself an environmentalist and was concerned about climate change. She'd been hearing it led to more frequent and intense natural disasters. So she researched the topic and then pitched to her fellow students and her teacher the idea for a story about the influence of climate change on hurricanes. Her story was okayed, and she looked for multiple credible sources. With the help of a professional science journalist and her teacher, she found good data and information from NOAA and NASA. She assembled her data and created a draft infographic. She presented and defended her conclusions to her peers and teacher. She revised multiple times before finally publishing her findings in an online news magazine. Everything Chelsea had read in liberal environmentalist sources told her that natural disasters like hurricanes were increasing because of climate change. As some cognitive scientists have put it, she began with a knowledge illusion. She was certain she'd find what people like her generally believed, whether that be liberal dogma or conservative dogma. But after weeks poring over data and reports, she'd come to an uneasy conclusion. Although it's possible that climate change may have something to do with hurricane frequency or intensity, we lack observational data to truly prove anything. At a public poster session sponsored by her school, Chelsea was essentially accused of being a climate change denier. That was just what she feared. She held her ground, though, explaining that the theories linking climate change to hurricane frequency and intensity were sound, but it mattered that the long-term data were not yet scientifically adequate. Because of her ideological polarization on climate change, Chelsea was making a bold, important stand. She'd learned where the strong evidence for climate change was and where the weaker evidence was. She believed of the value of living in harmony with our environment by doing what we can to combat human causes of climate change. But she wanted to respect what she'd learned about rigorous scientific methods. This meant she wasn't willing to go beyond the evidence on one small part of the debate just to bolster her position. She was becoming the kind of person I'd like to have participating in our democratic debates and decisions. Fake news, as we've seen, as I learned with my mom, can be a matter of life and death. We desperately need more people to become like Chelsea, people who understand that their judgments are influenced by knowledge illusions and their empathy for others who look and sound most like them, people who recognize their own bias and commit to being critical information consumers and producers. As educators for the future, we need to create the tools for our students to go beyond fake news and find the bigger picture. The health and life of each of us, of our democracies, and of our planet depends on it. Thank you.